Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. If you have scrolled through the podcast archives recently, you may have noticed that a very important topic is missing, an episode dedicated to female friendships. Now, there are a few reasons I have delayed recording on this topic. The first one, and honestly the biggest one, is I am overwhelmed by the responsibility of talking about such an important topic. As a woman, I know how foundational our friendships are to our lives. These are relationships that give us a sense of support and security. They're also a place of respite, somewhere we can let go of all the roles and titles we're holding and just be ourselves. I also believe that female friendships are carrying a lot of weight in our society, that they're really holding together the fabric of our communities. And when you combine all of this together, that's just a lot to cover. I don't know if I can do it justice. Now, the second reason that I have struggled to talk about female friendships is that I often feel that my experience of female friendship is different than most. I hear all of your stories and your experiences about the intensity, the drama, cattiness, jealousy. And if I'm being honest, it's been a very long time since my female friendships have dealt with these types of extreme experiences. Now, that's not to say that I've never had these, but it's been a couple decades. And I want to note that my friendships today aren't perfect. They are not always easy. There are definitely disagreements, hard conversations. I've experienced friendship breakups, been on the receiving end of friendship demotions. And I've had those days, like I am sure all of you have, where I'm left wondering, have I completely ruined this friendship? And I'm sharing this because I think that so many of you are going to hear what I just said and think, oh, well, Alex is just special. And sure, I'm special, but not in the way that you think. Some of you know my story, and if you don't, go listen to episode 19 or my founder's story on my website. I've always said that I think I ended up here doing this work because I approach my friendships differently. And it's not because I'm special. It's because I've had no other option. Because when my friends are my support system, I have gone to great lengths to never reach the point of drama or cattiness, to repair friendships. I will put myself in so much discomfort and have the healthy conflict as soon as possible so that I never have to reach the point of unhealthy conflict and risk losing a friendship. So again, I want to emphasize I'm not special, but I guess I am different. And that's just because I've been put in a position that I would never, ever wish upon anyone else. And it's caused me to approach my friendships differently. Now, the third and final reason that I haven't recorded an episode on female friendships is because, as many of you know, my work is often focused on what could be rather than what is. And I think that's an important distinction for today's episode. I love reimagining our friendships, but that means that I often don't focus on what is, but that is just as important. We all know that our female friendships are often bound by a strict set of rules that we don't always understand, which makes them feel incredibly fragile. And I know that there are so many of you out there who aren't quite ready to reimagine your friendships. You simply want to thrive in your current situation. And all I want is for you to have the connections that you need. So although I'm a rule breaker, you don't have to be. If your desire is just to thrive in the friendships that you currently have, that is exactly how today's guest can help you. And if you are a rule breaker, then from one rule breaker to another, we know that the first step to being a rule breaker is to understand the rules so well you can skate around them. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about today's guest. We are so lucky that there is an expert out there that is doing the deep work on female friendships. Danielle Bayard Jackson is a female friendship coach and an educator who speaks nationally about the science of women's platonic connections. Her coaching business, Friend Forward, is dedicated to teaching women how to create and maintain better female friendships. Danielle's expertise has been featured in numerous media outlets, and she uses the latest research to create practical strategies to help women create more depth in their platonic relationships. Today, we're going to talk about her book. Friends, her book is a game changer. It is called Fighting for Our Friendships. It was released this week, which means that you can buy it wherever you buy your books, including going straight to the show notes right now and hitting order. If you have ever found yourself saying, I just feel like I'm always the giver in this friendship, or I just can't relate to her anymore, then this is a book that you need in your friendship library. Danielle's book, Fighting for Our Friendships, breaks down the mechanics of female friendship in a way that will help you understand what's going on and where to put your energy. I am so excited to have Danielle here today. Let's dive into this conversation. Hi, Danielle. I am so honored that you are here on book launch. Week. We're 8 days out?
I'm so excited to be here and to talk all things friendship with you. So thank you so much for having me as a guest.
I want to start off by saying, I loved Fighting for Our Friendships. There were so many eye-opening tidbits in here, even for me, right? Somebody who is talking about this stuff, thinking about this stuff nonstop, as I'm sure you are. We think about friendship all the time. This is so deeply researched. It is very clear that you have tried endlessly to connect patterns for millions of women out there. I just really want to commend you for this book. It's beautiful.
That means so much to me. You put something out there, especially as a content creator, as anything. You put stuff out there, you think you did your best, you hope people receive it the right way. And so it's very encouraging for me to hear that it resonated with you. And I thank you so much for that feedback. That's awesome.
Yeah, you did a great job. And it's so fun to read it before people are reading it, because I'm going to obviously be telling, we're doing this podcast, but I'm going to tell my audience about it. I can't wait to see their takeaways. People are going to have this in their hands so soon. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah. I just think what makes me most excited, and I'm saying stuff that I'm sure you have observed as well, but so many resources for romantic relationships and how to be a good mom and how to be a boss in the boardroom, which is all great. And I always tell people, I hope this is one of many books on your friendship library. Truly. We're all adding different things to this space. And so to have so many people trust me along their friendship journey, something that's so deeply personal is amazing. And so I'm so glad and eager to get it in people's hands.
That was one of my biggest frustrations and motivators too, was that there are just so few people talking about this, so few resources. And if you think about it, it's kind of wild. Most of us, not all of us, you probably have more friendships and acquaintances, simpler friendships too, in your life than you do a lot of other relationships. And yet we spend so little time thinking about them.
Yeah.
That was part of what drove me to doing this as well.
Yeah, I've definitely observed that too. But I'm so glad that there's more public discourse around the complexities of friendships. So I'm hoping that having more elevated and wide-ranging conversation helps people to be able to enjoy more satisfaction in these friendships, because they're so important.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you and I have some similarity, which is that we, as we're just saying, kind of found ourselves here. We're so enthralled by this work, so interested, and just kept going down the path, even though there aren't a lot of people doing it. Can you talk a little bit about your journey to friendship coach? I was so inspired to read your story.
Yeah. So I always joke that like it definitely wasn't on my vision board when I was 10. Like I'm going to be, but I actually, studied education in school and was a high school English teacher for 6 years, teaching high school seniors. And it was something that I observed every day in the classroom with 18-year-olds. Like these are young adults. And so to see the differences between how the young ladies would congregate, how they would fight with one another versus the boys. It was like being in a lab every day for 6 years. And friendship issues were the number one things they wanted to talk to me about between classes and after school. And then I became the academic chair. So I'm leading the largest department at one of the largest schools in the country. And, most of my staff was bringing friendship issues for the students to me. So we had a front row seat in how issues of connections and belonging were directly impacting everything else, their academic performance, their confidence, and for some of them, even whether or not they came to school, if they felt like if they belonged to a group or not, especially the young ladies. And so I left the classroom and I got into public relations. So suddenly I find myself working with these high achieving, charismatic women. And it was not long before I realized, oh, secretly, you have friendship issues too. But of course, you're not going to make it public, right? Because we have to look like we have it together. So a lot of them have no shortage of social connections. They're just deeply unsatisfied with the friendships they've curated. And so for the past 6 years, I've been studying what does the research have to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict. And so far, it's been a fun ride.
In her book, Fighting for Our Friendships, Danielle asserts that female friendships are fragile. And I couldn't agree more. One of the reasons that female friendships are fragile is because women themselves are under a lot of pressure. We juggle the needs of everyone around us as mothers, wives, employees, daughters, sisters, and caregivers. So we're seeking out friends who will support us in these roles. We're desperately trying to survive and looking for someone to help us carry the load. And yet, societal messages tell women that the most important thing we can do is put all of our energy into finding a romantic partner. Now, to any men who are listening to this episode, I have done multiple episodes on men's friendship. My goal is always to bring you into the circle, to support you, to help you relearn how to do care work and how to lean into emotional labor. But if we are being honest in today's episode, and we are talking about what is instead of what could be, then I have to acknowledge that a lot of women are going to other women for emotional support. That although there's this societal pressure to find a romantic partner and that will solve all your problems, it often isn't actually the foundational piece that is helping women get through their days. And because women are under so much pressure, because they're experiencing similar struggles, we often find ourselves frustrated when our female friends just don't seem to understand our needs. Aren't we all going through this together? Shouldn't you know that I need help with this? With so much pressure, it's no wonder that we're quick to drop friends who don't measure up, to feel slighted, to react strongly, to feel disappointed. And when that happens, who has time to process and reflect and repair? We're already stretched so thin. So what do we take away from all this? Well, I believe that the very first step in leaning into our female friendships seems to be acknowledging how much weight they are expected to carry in our lives. To recognize the immense pressure and expectations placed on these relationships so we can approach them with greater understanding and compassion. Something I find really interesting that you point out in the book is that although we have this focus on romantic love, quite often men can't support us in the ways that we are looking to be supported in that emotional labor.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I always hesitate because I can already hear people are like, okay, you're generalizing and I'm sure you get it.
Don't hesitate. Listen, I never thought I would talk about marriage when in my friendship work so much. It kind of drives me nuts, but it feels like this big fight for attention. Like they can't both exist sometimes.
Yeah, and it's definitely hard. And to the topic of getting adequate emotional support from men, it's tricky because according to the research, the number one thing women look for in their same-sex friendships is emotional support. It's the
Mhm.
number one thing across multiple studies. They keep coming to the number one thing, which says that we're like, hey, if I don't get anything else from you, that's basic, that you're going to support me emotionally. The tricky part of this is that we've been raised to experience emotional intimacy in all close relationships, romantic, platonic, sharing feelings and showing up for you, listening, sensing you need something and then being there for you since we were little. For a lot of men, unfortunately, they have never really experienced emotional intimacy outside of being with their girlfriend.
Mhm.
And so that leaves a lot of women doing the emotional labor for you to talk about your feelings or coaching you through it because you have not had as much practice. And now I'm expecting it because I get this all the time. This is what we do. We share, we show up for one another. But if you're in spaces where, on the more extreme end, you're being discouraged from sharing how you feel, for asking questions about your guy friend's personal life, if you're being made to feel like that's weird or that's too
Mhm.
much or that's inappropriate, then now I'm asking you to do something where I'm asking you to release the shame of exploring how you feel. You don't know how to craft questions that show you're listening and offering support and might need to be coached through. And so I think for a lot of women, they turn to friendships even more because there's the
Mhm.
lack of the support they desire from a husband or male partner. I think that kind of makes them even hungrier for those specific kinds of benefits in their platonic relationships with women.
That's a lot of pressure, right? I
Hmm.
think we can both agree that that ends up being a lot of pressure on our female relationships to hold us up, to support us, especially because most of us as women are then doing that for other people,
Hmm.
for our community, for our relation or our romantic partners, our children, our family of origin. We are holding, right? I'm an oldest daughter.
Mm.
We are holding so much for other people. And then I think that leads to a lot of pressure on our female friendships sometimes. How do you think that impacts our friendships?
Oh yeah, 100%. And to your point earlier about women often playing roles where we're acting in service to or having a power struggle or power dynamics in other contexts, right? As mothers, as spouses, because the research is still showing that we do the share of domestic labor in the home or
Hmm.
even at work, because, again, they're finding that even if I have an executive position, I'm still being charged with secretarial stuff, like put the list together for the company party and go take notes. And so if there's a power dynamic in every other space, it's like we almost have a higher expectation that in our friendships, you of all people should be able to understand, should be able to support, should come alongside me. And the research also shows that we do have higher expectations than men in our close relationships, both romantic and platonic. And so I think that's one of many reasons why sometimes there's
Hmm.
this fragility or tension sometimes in women to women friendships, because I expect so much of you because you're another woman. You should get it. You should be here. You should be a source of refuge. You should know what to say when I'm devastated. I shouldn't have to tell you the support I need because you're another woman. So I shouldn't have to say it. I mean, you put this together and it does become like a fraught with expectations and unmet expectations rather. And it can be tricky. It can definitely be tricky to navigate.
So when that happens, right, these high expectations that are often unspoken and can be really all consuming. I mean, I think about this quite often when I think about friendships, right? When we say, like, they're my friend, everybody's working from a different set of expectations. And a lot of people have these super high expectations, these kind of like all consuming, all or nothing expectations. What advice do you give to women when there is all that pressure and those expectations are so high?
Yeah. So the first is we talk about how where they've downloaded the messages that women ought to just know.
Mm.
And then sometimes it's just switching perspective. I mean, truly, like that whole, classic exercise of like, well, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Because if I told you that one of your friends is deeply disappointed with you, but she's not going to tell you because you should know, because you're a friend, you'd be frustrated. You'd feel like you're being tested. You'd feel like it's unfair that they're not giving you the data that you need to be able to self-correct or recalibrate here. It's frustrating and insulting that they're not coming to you, just being direct. But we often say, she's another woman. She should know how to support me. She should be picking up on my cues of like that I'm upset. Why do I have to say it? And sociolinguist Deborah Tannen, she calls it the birthday dilemma, where women kind of expect that you're going to get them the right gift for a birthday, but you're not going to say it. Because if you say it, it detracts from the closeness you're supposed to have. But if I say nothing and you get me the wrong gift, it's revealing you don't really know me. And so it's like this cycle of like, I'm not saying anything, but you want to know. So we talk about, what is it you wish she knew? And what's holding you back from saying so? And I just don't think it's fair that in every other context, we not only anticipate conflict, but we feel a certain permission to talk about what we need and to say it up front. But with friends, we believe that our chemistry is somehow going to transcend the need for communication. And it's just not true. And it's not fair.
Chapter 3 of Fighting for Our Friendships is all about healthy conflict and platonic intimacy. In it, Danielle highlights that a significant factor that contributes to the fragility of women's friendships is high expectations. She even talks about this review of 36 studies that found that women want more from their close relationships than men do, especially when it comes to reciprocity and self-disclosure, which means that women are setting and expected to meet high standards. There is a very narrow margin for error in our female friendships, and we register more violations in our friendships than men. So when there is a narrow margin of error and a high risk of conflict, many of us are stuck in a place where we have to decide whether our friendships are worth putting the effort into. And I think you already know my stance on that. And I've already told you that I am generally more willing to take risks in my friendship because it feels like my only option. But I know that that isn't everyone's experience. And that you might be thinking, Alex, this is so uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. It's not worth the effort or the risk. And so I want to tell you that you don't have to navigate conflict in this trial or error fashion that I have. You have resources. Danielle's book. In chapter 4, she breaks down healthy versus unhealthy conflict, and she even has this phenomenal step-by-step guide on how to navigate a hard conversation. I think that she really helps you get to a place where conflict isn't scary, where you can see that conflict builds intimacy in our friendships. There's this phrase that Michael and I use. We actually included it in our wedding vows. And I'm going to tell you about it so you can steal it. But we say that I always trust that a low will bring us to a higher high, which really just means that I trust that doing the work to work through this conflict is worth it because we will feel closer on the other side. So feel free to steal that mantra for your friendships. We've obviously both seen that exact scenario play out probably in our own friendships and in other people's friendships. So often, it's just so interesting. So I'm the too direct friend. And I think that actually might be, well, I'm not too direct. I've worked very hard to soften that. But my focus, or not my focus, my tendency is always to be very direct. And so reading that section of your book, I had this moment where I was like, I wonder how many friendships that saved for me. Because I can think of numerous times where, like, here's an example. A friend of mine, we were on this big group trip, like when the world shut down, a bunch of us rented a house and we all basically moved in together for a month. And we had all these agreements, right, on what everyone's safety tolerance was and all that stuff. And one friend felt like they had been kind of left out. They couldn't comply with what the house's agreed upon tolerance was, and therefore they couldn't come. And she was upset. And I just called her and I was like, okay, here's how I think I messed up in this conversation. And I'm sorry for the ways I did that. I also think you just kind of assumed certain things. And we had like this great conversation about it. And I was like, I want to have this conversation because I care about this friendship so much. And we worked through it and we moved on. Now, I know that's not the normal thing to do, Danielle. Like, so many people aren't going to be that direct. And so many people are out there with these unspoken feelings.
Yeah. I think you and I are the same in that, because I'm going to be like, okay, I sensed there was tension. Help me out, girl. What and I actually feel safe. I feel safer with the friends that I can trust you're doing that with me, because I don't have to guess, like, was she lying? Was she people pleasing me? Like, when I can relax into, oh, I can just operate freely because I know my friend's going to give me updates and ask me questions and tell me what's going on, so I can relax. I don't have to guess. I also want to validate those who feel reluctant, because I know it's such a tendency among women, people pleasing, because there's a lot of things that I feel like we have to consider that men don't. And I feel like we have a lot more social consequences for being perceived as difficult. And I feel like that increases depending on your intersectional identity. So as a Black woman working, like if I'm with, the times that I've been with white friends, I find myself managing reputation or perception a little bit more when I'm angry, because is that going to be perceived as I have an attitude or whatever, even though we're friends. But with friends of the same ethnicity or cultural background, you understand that maybe they are going to honor the range of my humanity, and I can fuss. And then we move on, and it's not like, oh, whoa, that was intense. That was aggressive, right? So I think in a lot of different contexts, women, and then specifically women of color, but women, we don't want to be perceived as difficult because it comes with consequences. So I think a lot of us are managing others' feelings. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, like, I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to make her uncomfortable. I don't want to look like the bad guy. I don't want to make her look like the bad guy. A lot of the language around why we're reluctant to have hard conversations comes from a desire to maintain an appearance of cooperation. So if I tell you I'm upset about last night, do I look like I'm being drama? Because I don't want to be the girl bringing drama, even though it's totally valid for me to be a woman who's irritated with something that happened last night. We get to be irritated and frustrated, but I don't want to be the difficult woman, so I'll be quiet. I don't want to hurt her feelings, so I'll be quiet. I don't want to rock the boat, so I'll be quiet. I wonder how much of us kind of sense that the friendship itself is kind of fragile, so I'm not going to say anything, right? I don't know if they just like me because I'm compliant, and what happens? Am I still lovable if I'm disruptive? Are you going to still be here if I tell you I'm uncomfortable by something you said or did? Are you going to withdraw from the friendship? And it feels like too great a risk. So I'll be quiet, even to the point where if you ask me explicitly, hey, Danielle, are we good? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, of course. Dishonest, because it feels like too great a risk to say, actually, I'm kind of offended by what you said yesterday. And so it's tricky. And then finally, I'll say too, I think it might be because a lot of us don't have practice with navigating conflict in a healthy way. And then we move on. So for a lot of us, again, going back to before, if we kind of do subscribe to the idea that friendships are just like, female friendship is just like so elite and beautiful and magical, then it's disenchanting when we have our first hiccup. So I'm going to take this as evidence that maybe the friendship's over. So if I don't realize that, like, oh, we're having a thing, but it doesn't mean the end, I almost have more permission to lean into it because I feel safe to do so, because it's okay. We get into it and then we move on. But if I've never gotten into it and moved on, then it feels risky to get into it. So I'm just going to minimize any discomfort I feel and pray for the best.
If you have listened to, I don't know, more than 5 episodes of this podcast, then what I'm about to say is going to be familiar to you. Many of the issues that we face in our friendships are bigger than us. And by that, I mean that there are normally numerous societal factors that are influencing all of our relationships, and female friendships are no exception. In chapter 4 of Fighting for Our Friendships, Danielle really dives in to how gender expectations are playing out in our female friendships. There's this part where Danielle talks about how when she sits across from woman after woman in her coaching sessions, who are all struggling to explain the exact same problem, it becomes clear that the issue might be bigger than us as individuals. Now, many of us consider ourselves strong, opinionated women who are unafraid to speak our minds. However, there are certain situations and friendships that have us biting our tongue more than we'd like. Women have a tendency to avoid anger because society dictates that we should suppress that emotion. And so in moments where maybe we should be angry with our female friends or we should express disappointment, we often hold back and bite our tongues. We're left sitting there calculating the social risk of what we're about to say. We don't want to be called names or labeled in various ways. We've all been there. Too big of a personality, hard to be around, too emotional, too much, rude, aggressive. I love chapter 4 of Danielle's book because it really breaks down how the gender bias impacts our friendships. Those ideas that women should be loyal or nurturing, likable or empathetic. She explores how all this people-pleasing and trying to fit into this societal box is affecting our friendships, and how doing so is holding us back from building the authentic, supportive friendships we desire. We're doing that in service of ourselves and like supporting ourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And society has such an impact on how we're approaching these friendships. You know, you talk about in the book, like being the good girl, doing what we're supposed to do. How often are we all doing that in our friendships? So often.
Yeah. And it's tricky knowing that if other women in my group also subscribe to the idea of being the good girl, then when I'm stepping outside of it and being difficult, is that a penalty here? You know, because if we all subscribe to this stereotype or ideal, then a part of me knows it's not safe to push back because we all agree that that would be being drama. And we're so chill. We're so chill. So like, here you come with the drama, you know, when in reality, like maybe some of us are more prone to like high highs and low lows and that, okay. I once heard Shasta Nelson say, who's, you know, a friendship expert, but she says that you can't have any human relationship without drama by definition, ups and downs. That's going to happen. Right. But if I don't feel safe to bring stuff without it being conflated to like, you are so much, you're doing so much, making such a big deal. It's just tricky. And my theory too is that people who often say that are maybe like avoidant by nature. So like to this person, it's always going to be perceived as doing too much. So I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's about finding people whose maybe friendship style is compatible and who give room to say how you feel while also balancing that with self-awareness. Hey, have I gotten the feedback multiple times that I blow up? Maybe that's a me thing, you know, and hopefully I'm in community with people who can love on me and also be like, yeah, you respond a little too intensely, but I love you. I just really need to work on that. You know, that's my hope for everyone, that we find those people, that we be those people, that we find those people.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten that feedback before. 100%.
Yeah.
And I've had to rethink how I approach things, right? It's a growth opportunity.
There it
and I really
is.
do take that seriously because my friendships are so foundational for me that I'm like, okay, I got to lean in and do this work. That just deciding, you know, something I say on here a lot, which I'd love your take on, is it's hard work either way. It's hard work to figure out how to navigate the conflict and do that work and have that growth mindset in friendship. It is hard to let go of a friendship and maybe need to build a new one. Like making new friends is work. That is also work. And it's hard to go it alone.
Oh, yeah.
They're all hard. So just thinking there's an easy option, like it really doesn't exist out there.
Yeah.
And these are skills that we can tap into and really build for ourselves that will serve us in not only our friendships, but I think in all of our connections.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's maybe Raina Cohen who I heard say this on a podcast, but she said, I'd rather have the issues with community instead of the issues without it. So, you know, I know people tend to say like, oh my God, it's people are so much and they're untrustworthy and they let you down. And it's like, yes, those are the problems that come with being in community, but I'd rather have those than the problems that come with being alone. And so hopefully that helps to put in perspective when we do feel a pinch or a friend disappoints us, which is inevitable, or there's a conflict, all that's inevitable, but I'd rather have that.
When you're talking to people who have that, they've kind of written off friendship. Like, it's too hard. It's not worth it. They've probably been slighted before. They've had bad interactions. How do you discuss with them the fact that female friendship really is important and it's worth leaning into?
It's always a really tender moment when people are saying, hey, you don't understand. Like, I have for real been betrayed. I have, and, describe often, especially talking about women's friendships, they're going to say something about, but they talked about me. Like, I thought she was my friend and she was talking about me, or she hit on my boyfriend, like these egregious things. And I have noticed something that tends to be more effective for me in kind of the bringing them back is, instead of showing them the research on how it's so important though, or instead of countering it with like, yeah, but women can also do great things too, is being really curious about that experience. Oh gosh, that must have been so frustrating. Oh my gosh, I agree. Like, oh my God, if that happened to me, I'd be devastated. Wait, then she did what? So I'm kind of meeting there to show like I've experienced, maybe to a lesser degree, but the same kind of things. That really sucks. I'm so sorry. What helped me though is having the courage to position myself for what therapists refer to as corrective experiences. And so what that means is, if I've gone through something that made me download the message, friends bad, women unsafe, women dangerous, it's natural to say, I'm not doing that anymore. That makes sense. But just because something is comfortable for me doesn't mean it's good for me. I may have gotten used to living life without close girlfriends. It doesn't mean that it's healthy for me to live without close friends. And so a corrective experience means I might allow myself to be in a situation that feels really similar, right? Let's use the example of I shared something with somebody and they went and told everyone. They weaponized it against me or something. I might be in a situation where here's an opportunity to share something about myself with a new friend. And here we go again. Well, if the circumstances look a little bit different, meaning this person has shown evidence, she's trustworthy. When I see her with other people, she tends to be very kind. She operates with like high integrity. I've observed this. She's never crossed me. The circumstances look safe, even though they look very similar. I muster the courage to try again. And I share a little something about myself to give my brain a chance to see, oh, okay, maybe this is not so bad. And I'm hoping that she meets me with, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. Or like, hey, you don't have to worry, that stays here with us. My brain updates the message I downloaded about women being bad. And I think, oh, okay, I guess you can trust some of them, but I have to muster the courage to position myself for corrective experiences because my brain knows intellectually friendship is important to my physical, mental, emotional health. But emotionally, I'm very tender and I don't want to be hurt again. But if you are avoiding friends because you're scared of being hurt, this is not very comforting, but you probably will be. You enter into a relationship with anybody, even with me or with you. I'm going to speak for you. We are people who value friendship, value being direct, healthy communication, yada, yada. And I'm still going to do and say things that let you down or hurt your feelings. Hopefully not intentionally. That's a whole other issue. Somebody who delights in your humiliation. But yeah, am I going to be a person who sometimes does things that are hurtful? Yes, I will. And I'm hoping that that's few and far between. And that I set a history over the context of our friendship that you're like, man, Danielle normally doesn't do that. She normally doesn't operate like that. So when she fails to call me back or says something kind of not kind, or she's short with me, I'm weighing it against the history of our friendship. And I have a margin of error for her, a margin for mistake. We reconcile, we talk through that. I trust her commitment to try to not do that again, and we move on. But I think people are just scared, and I totally get it, but I don't think it's justifiable enough to be like, I'm going to withdraw from close relationships with human beings because only you suffer for that.
I think so many people are holding themselves back, obviously, for the exact reason you just talked about. I think that people are also holding back because friendship feels too much, feels overwhelming. Something I think about a lot when it comes to female friendship, and this touches on what we said earlier, like, right, as women, we are navigating dynamics in our day to day that other members of our community don't understand. In each of our identities, we're navigating that. And because of that, we have this shared language or understanding, right? Like, we're on the TikTok land is the man versus bear debate right now. Have you seen this?
Yes. Oh my God.
Right? Which, when I say to you, you know, I could say like, oh, would you rather be left in the woods with a man or a bear? And we would just look at each other. I don't even need you to answer. I know what your answer is going to be, right? We all have this understanding. And because of that, sometimes I feel like there's this just like passing back and forth of emotional labor because we can't offload it like out into our community. And that leaves us in this overwhelm for some women saying, you know, I can't handle friendship because I don't have capacity, because it's too much, because I'm overwhelmed, because I can't take that on for someone else. What about those women? What would you say to those women out there?
Oh, I totally get that. 100%. I will say it might be worth every now and then kind of doing like a check-in to see what is depleting me. Like, once I get to a point where I feel like I'm so cognitively, physically, emotionally tapped out, I don't have time for friendship, I would encourage that person to look at your other ties, roles, obligations. If it feels like there's so much, I don't have anything left over in the reserves for my friendships, because I'll tell you what, I did a little experiment this year. I saw that the American Time Use Survey said that we used to spend 6 hours. I'm sure you've heard this, 6 hours a week with friends in 2013. Fast forward 10 years. Now we spend a little over 2 hours, right? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to spend 6 hours a week with friends. Like, I can do this. This is my thing. I'm just going to see. And most weeks I've been successful. I did this for the first 3 months of the year. Most weeks were pretty successful, but a lot of things that came up for me, the first thing that I realized was I had to change my relationship with work. The day is over at 4 o'clock. I'm not answering emails at night or on the weekends because it directly impacted the time I had for friends, the energy I had for friends when I was so like deeply immersed in work, 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 work. I also had to like enlist my husband's help. I mean, he's a great dad, very active, but it made me realize how much I need community because I have 2 children under 5. If I'm going to make time for friends, I need my community to rally around me. I can't be the sole person taking care of these kids. And again, he's very active, but it just highlighted how important it was to have help at home so I can engage with my friends. So it brings up a lot of other things. If you're too tired for friendship, I really do encourage you to question what the health of the relationships outside of friendship are looking like, because we shouldn't be too tired or too exhausted for friendship. And then finally, I would say, look at the people who you're trying to spend time with, because, you know, I hope this doesn't sound shady. I got to be honest. You know, when I found myself saying, okay, I got to clock 6 hours with friends, I'm doing that with people who I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I was not trying to make time for the women in my life who were kind of cool, but I feel depleted by afterwards, or it's always negative, or whatever. Okay. I'm not electing to take time, which is a limited resource, and give it to her. So if you are saying I'm really too tired for friendship, I don't have it to give, how else are you being depleted? Let's modify those relationships accordingly. And then also, who are the friends you're too tired for? Because if you don't generally like these people's company, or it feels like a performance, or you've got to gather up the energy for them, I encourage you to look at that too.
I could not love your answer more.
It's tricky.
I could not love your answer more. It's hard, right? We say these things that we know are going to ruffle feathers. Like what you said is going to ruffle some people's feathers, 100%. And we got to say it, because this goes back to like the whole point of this, which is that these female friendships are revolutionary because they're for you. So often, right, there's this pressure to, you're a mom. I'm not a mom at the moment. go make mom friends. And while part of that's in service to you, that's also in service to your family. Go make entrepreneur friends. Like, yes, supporting you, but also supporting your income, supporting your family. Like, at the end of the day, I love what you're saying, because you're saying my people need to rally around me fulfilling my bucket. And that's not to say these people you're hanging out with aren't also mom friends or entrepreneur friends or like pieces of you, but that's not like the only reason you're doing that. You're doing it for you.
Yeah.
And you're standing there saying, like, this is so important that I have this, especially in a world where women get, siloed into all their roles.
Yeah.
I think that's just such a beautiful example for people to hear.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for you for sharing that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you. And I just hear the heart of those women, and I've been on both sides. I mean, like, I've been in a space where maybe it was a brief season, but where you are disappointed by a woman, or you're too tired for friendship, and, and kind of having the skill, honestly, to coach yourself through it. And I often like to say, like, yeah, it really sucks. There's no better word for it. It really sucks when people let you down, or when you're rejected. But I gotta be honest, I'm kind of more interested in what happens next, because that part's inevitable. Like, I would like to think I'm a relatively charismatic, interesting person. And there's still women who are like, I'm not feeling Danielle. And I gotta be like, oh my God. Okay. Like, that's just what it is. So I can't become immobilized from putting myself out there and engaging in friendship, because what if it doesn't go well? What if they reject me? What if they don't invite me? What if they don't like me back? Those what ifs are keeping me immobilized, instead of assuming, yeah, I probably will be rejected multiple times along my friendship journey, but I think I'm okay with it, even though it still stings. I'm okay with it because I would like to think I've cultivated some resilience. I'm gonna be okay. That is going to sting. I think it's fake when people are like, I mean, I just move on. I don't even care. That's going to sting for my ego. Like, who doesn't want to not belong or feel like people think you're amazing, like funny and interesting? Yes. Okay. But I think I'm going to be okay because I've developed resilience. I'm more scared for people who don't have resilience after the fight with your friend. You just gave an example of that phone call with your friend, her being able to move on, you two together being able to say, like, wow, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking ownership of your stuff. Okay, let's keep going. And some of us don't know how to keep going relationally or independently. We don't know how to keep going. And I think that's like literally like what friendship is about, because the hurdles are going to come. People are going to tell you no. They're not going to text you back. They're going to say something unkind. That happens. But if you can't move on, I feel more of a sense of urgency and care for people who can't figure that out, because I mean, the difference between that person's friendship landscape and the friendship landscape of a person who's active, resilient, self-confident, it just looks a lot different.
And when you're talking about that, they're all such immediate concerns, right? My brain, because of my unique experiences, when you're saying like, what if they reject me? What if they this? What if they that? I'm always like, okay, well, if I don't do this work now, what if I end up divorced? What if I experience like a great loss? What if I go bankrupt? I don't know. What if these big things happen and I don't have these relationships around me to hold me through that? Like, I would rather have the immediate discomfort of that conversation in a friendship, because the what if in my mind is that big, scary, what if some huge, completely life altering thing happens and I haven't been willing to take those small risks and I end up later alone in my experience, like without a support system. And that's just my take from my lived experience, and probably why I invest so much energy. But I want to share for anybody listening, because I think sometimes we aren't thinking of that bigger picture.
Yeah, that's so good.
So you close out the book, and we're going to close out the podcast with this. You talk about how you kind of give yourself permission to lean into these friendships, that you are going to allow yourself to be exposed, that you are going to allow yourself to feel vulnerable, and you're going to give yourself permission to love them back because you've formed friendships that are worth the fight. And I was just hoping that you personally, in your life, you could talk about why friendship is worth the fight for you. Like why this work is worth it.
That is a good question. First I want to say something I'm personally working through, if I'm being vulnerable right now, is being able to respond to questions about my personal life. It is very fun doing all these like media interviews and national TV and like all these fun, big things. But it still to this day throws me off when somebody asks about my personal life because I want to look perfect for you. Okay. But it's really hard for me. I think I was so resistant to leaning into friendships with other women because I was not comfortable with myself as a woman. And by that, I mean my ideas of womanhood, I did not feel personally qualified for. So to be beautiful and smart and feminine and desirable to men, like you're just walking and men are just like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
If I, in my brain or naturally nurturing, there was one point when I was in college where I was actively saying like, oh my God, I don't want kids. But in reality, I didn't think I was nurturing. And there had been people in my family who made jokes about like me walking too clunkily and being so awkward. And so I thought like, oh, I don't have that smooth woman's touch thing. I was not comfortable. I was not sure. And I felt like all that womanhood is, I don't have that. And so being in the company of other women only amplifies the lack,
that they would see
100%, the lack that you don't have. And women see you. Women see you. You can't trick them like you can fool men. They are so easy. Okay. But for a woman, she sees you. She sees you. And so I don't want to be around women. I didn't want to look at them because they could see the clunkiness, the awkwardness, the lack of femininity, the lack of intelligence in some ways, the lack of charisma. They can see it. They can smell it on me. So I'd rather not be around you. In fact, I'd rather pretend that I don't want you around at all. I'd rather pretend I'm rejecting you first. And the more comfortable I became in my skin, literally and figuratively, the more I expanded my own definition of womanhood. It can look like walking like a pirate or like a ballerina. Like the more comfortable I got with me, the more I expanded my ideas of womanhood. This sounds so corny, but I'm telling you, there were more friendships with women blossoming because I no longer saw myself as different from them. I was an extension of them. And to this day, like I have my moments of maybe being a little jealous or whatever, because I'm a person, right?
Yep.
But I see other women, I kid you not, I feel like you are me. You are me. We're the same. We're both maybe insecure. We're both strong. We're both accepting. We're both judgy. We're all the things. And so I think it's allowed me to have permission to love on other women because it is me loving myself. But I see myself now as belonging to that group. And not just by checking off the box woman on the paper, but I feel like I'm a cool, interesting, funny, awesome woman just like you, and so that kind of changed everything.
That is so beautiful. And I think that so many people listening are going to identify with that. This idea of like being seen and allowing to be seen. I mean, when you're seen, you feel like you belong and you feel more tapped in, and we can all accept that none of us are perfect in a world that wants to tell us to be perfect, especially as women. Especially as women. Like yet again, a way that these friendships are revolutionary. We're just sitting in a room all saying like, hey, this is me.
Yeah.
I'm a mess sometimes. Like, I don't look like this, the social media or the perfect this or the perfect that. Like, I just am. So I really appreciate your answer. I think a lot of people are going to sit with that one.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me the space to share. I'm getting more comfortable sharing it because, to your point, it might be somebody else's story too. And I think I would have gotten here faster if, when I was 8 or 15, more women were saying, sharing this stuff. So I'm so glad to share this space with you.
Yeah. And by the way, I totally get what you're saying about the personal shares. I mean, my past and childhood, like that's a whole ripping the Band-Aid off on that was terrifying. And, I had to shake for days while I posted it. But I totally get you navigating the friendship piece too, especially friendships we're currently in, and talking about that is such a delicate balance that you and I are both doing, like trying to be respectful of our friendships and trying to do this work. It really is hard. So I'm with you on that journey. I totally understand. So often we talk about female friendship. We talk about it as a means for support, for sharing in our struggles and navigating all the pressures that we've covered deeply in this episode, or for reciprocity and listening, or for somebody showing up and helping us. But that hidden gem in my final question to Danielle was the joy that our female friendships bring us in being seen, of laying down all the expectations society has put on us to be all the things and to be perfect and well-spoken and attractive and. But sometimes our female friendships just let us be seen for ourselves. And when I think back to some of my most prized moments in friendship, those are exactly the moments I cherish most. When I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking, gosh, about a year ago, I went on a bachelorette weekend with some of my closest friends. And we spent the whole weekend, honestly, just kind of being silly, like letting our guard down and relaxing. There were these moments and these hours where we kind of forgot our age and our responsibilities. And then we would come back at night and we'd all be standing in this apartment we had rented. And I'd be sitting there having a conversation with my friend as she is pumping. She has a little baby at home. And then she's cleaning and she's sanitizing. And it's that reminder of all these labels that we kind of have forgotten about for a few hours that day. And then just as quickly as we were reminded of those labels, her and I were sharing a room and we crawled into bed. And I can't even tell you what we were laughing about, but when I tell you we were laughing hysterically, like crying about the things we had done that day and the mouth tape I put on as we were getting into bed. And I think just laughing about the relief we had to be there and to be together, to peel back the layers and just be me and her and be seen and accepted as such. To me, that is one of the most beautiful things about female friendship. It's why female friendship is worth fighting for. Now, I want to thank Danielle for her knowledge and her candor and her openness. And I will remind you that I cannot recommend her book, Fighting for Your Friendships, enough. Danielle talks a lot about building your friendship library, and I would venture to say that this is a must-have on your shelf. So head to the show notes, go give her a follow, go listen to her podcast, and go buy her book. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @itsAlexAlexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.